use it in, but we also use it in measurement. And we also use it in pretty much we use it in everything, and you will need solve in year 12. Okay, it's probably the button you're going to use the most. So what it is it's telling your calculator to solve an equation. So there's two different ways. We're going to start with it as being solve an equation. There's a different method as well, which is about rearranging an equation. So the way which we do this is we're in our calculator page, and we need to tell our calculator to solve an equation. If I put an equation in here, so let's say 3x plus 4 equals 12, if I put an equation in there and I press enter, it's just going to give me that equation back. It's just going to simplify it. So if I had like 8 over 4x plus 3 equals 12, and I write that, it's just going to simplify whatever I've written. It's still going to leave an equation, because all your calculator's doing is you've gone 3x plus 4 equals 12. It's gone, yep, 3x plus 4 equals 12. I don't know what else you want me to do, so that's what it's put in. So if we want to know something, if we want to know what x is, if we want to know what that pronumeral actually represents, what number it does, we need to go calculator, solve this equation, 3x plus 4 equals 12, and find me the value of x. That's what we're saying, okay? So to do that, we need to go menu, algebra, solve. So menu 3, 1. Menu, algebra, solve. And I'll come up with that screen. So menu, algebra, solve. Now, whatever you put into your calculator, it must have an equal sign, because if you're going to solve something, you have to know what it equals. So you have to it has to be an equation, must have an equal sign. You must also have only one pronumeral, only one letter in it to be able to solve. To actually be able to find an answer, x equals something. Bryce, can you move, please? So to actually be able to find an answer, it needs to have only one pronumeral, and it has to have an equation with an equal sign. So if we put this into here, we write solve, and then we say 3x plus 4 equals 12. And then I need to go comma what I'm looking for. So what are we actually trying to find an answer for? X. So I go comma x, and that gives me the answer of x equals 8 over 3. If I want to change that from and you can write your answer as x equals 8 over 3, and that is completely correct. Okay, however, if I wanted a decimal answer, what would I press? Control enter. Now, quick one from the test. If I asked you to write that, sorry, hang on. Actually, I'll just change that a little bit. If I had a third, what decimal is a third? 0.3 recurring. If you wrote a third and then you wrote 0.3, you didn't get the answer right, because it's not. 0.3 is actually quite different to 0.3333333. Okay, so you need to be aware that for this answer, if you're going to write it as a decimal, it's not 2.6, it's not 2.7 unless you got asked to round to one decimal place. It's 2.6 recurring. Okay, yes. And put a little dot above the 6 or a line above the 6. And you don't need to write 6, 6, just 6 is fine, because you know. Now, if I know, how do I know that's recurring? There's a 7 at the end, because it rounds up. So anytime it's 0.6, if you just see the 17 at the end, it's just because your calculator rounds as well. Okay, it's actually 6 continuing. You can leave it as a fraction. You don't have to worry about those things. But let's go back to the solve. So solve will tell us, we put in solve bracket, put in our equation, comma x. We're saying solve this equation, find me the value of x, and it gives you an answer. Does that make sense to everybody? There's quite a few people who do not know how to use this yet, so I need you to make sure everybody knows. It makes everything easier. All right, so when we write it, we write solve, we write our equation, we write a comma, and we write what you're trying to solve for. And that's there. This is on your notes. I've copied it into this class. Now, the other button you can use it for, or the other thing you can use solve for, is to rearrange an equation. So see, I've got a squared plus b squared equals c squared there. What rule is that again? Pythagoras. Now, that is the formula you get given in your formula sheet. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. You don't get the rearranged ones, you know, the one with the square root sign. You don't get the rearranged ones where, you know, like it just has your B equals, so for a shorter side. So you might want to use your calculator to work that out. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm finding B. I actually know what the hypotenuse is and I know what the one of the shorter sides is. I'm finding this side. Let's rearrange the equation. This is actually where your calculator is really, really good, because when you get to measurement, it'll rearrange things for you so that you don't have to rearrange all your algebra by yourself. So I'd highly recommend people who are having trouble with their algebra skills in the calculator section, when there's like worded questions and stuff, use this. So it will rearrange the equation so that the subject is whatever you choose it to be. So what I mean by that is I'm going to go solve. So menu, algebra, solve, or I'm just going to write solve, okay? I'm then going to put in that equation. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Okay, and this time I'm going to say I need that equation to have the subject as A. So what am I going to press? Comma and A. It's going to come up with something a bit strange, but can you actually see where our answer is?
Sorry, can I just pinch
Yeah, that's fine. Now you'll notice here that there's a negative one there. Now we're not looking at negative answers, so it's actually this one here. Now not all of the ones you rearrange are going to come up with lots of different options, but look for the one which actually works. It says or, so it's either this one or A squared equals the square root of C squared, take B squared. That's that rearranged equation we've talked about. Can everybody see that? Yeah? So we can rearrange anything. So I could say 4x, so I'll just do the solve part, solve bracket, 4x plus 3y equals 12. If I want to make it so that that equation has y at the front, I just go comma y. It will rearrange that equation for me. Any time you need to rearrange an equation so it's got something else at the start, you can use solve to do that.
How does it know that you want just to be rearranged?
Because any equation which you're rearranging will have more than one pronumeral in it, okay? Because otherwise it can't solve. So if it's got one pronumeral, it's going to find you the answer. If it's got more than one pronumeral, it's going to rearrange it, okay? Any questions? So to do that, e.g. find the value. So this is our, let's have a look at this other example here. So you'd use this formula to be able to do, you'd use solve to find some volume questions. And a lot of people had trouble with this sort of question in your test. And this question is an inverse question. So where you get given the volume and you get given some of the lengths, but you need to find one of the lengths. So you need to go backwards through a formula. Because most of you guys are pretty good about using a formula straight up, volume of this, and you just sub in the numbers. But when you get given the volume, and then you have to sub in the numbers, you find it a little bit harder. So let's have a look at this example. I'll just, we'll do it together. Yeah. No. Yes. All right. So if I look at this question, and let's break it down so that we can use solve in it. It's going to say the volume of a triangular prism is 53 square meters, cubic meters. My other class not pick that up. The base of the triangle is 8 meters and the height of the prism is 3 meters. What is the height of the triangle? So this question says the volume is 53. That's that part there. The volume is 53. The base of the triangle is 8. And the height of the prism, you need to note the word prism. It's not the height of the triangle, it's the height of the prism is 3. We're trying to find the height of the triangle. So we need to know a formula to find the volume of a triangular prism. How do we find the volume of something? How do you find the volume? Area of the base shape times times the height. Okay, so the area of the base shape is a triangle. How do we find the area of a triangle? Half base times height. Okay, and so times by the height of the prism. That's our formula. So then we can sub in the numbers. 53 equals half. This question was like the one where you had to melt down the sphere into that. So we had to actually go and find the length. 53 equals half of 8 times by x times by 3. Now, instead of having to rearrange that whole equation, which people found really hard, instead we can put this into our calculator with solve. So we can go menu, algebra, solve. 53 equals half times 8 times x times 3. And what are we trying to solve for? X. So we go comma, x. And that gives us our answer of 4.42. And that's fine in a calculator section. As long as you've subbed in the numbers to your equation, you can use solve to find the answer. So x equals 4.42. And that's your using solve to actually for an application question, which you guys find quite challenging. Okay?
If we just did it in a calculator
Yeah.
and got the answer and we just wrote those 3 things, we would get full marks.
That's fine. This is the most important line of working. Yeah? So you're not being, especially in a calculator section, which is when you're going to use this, you're not actually being assessed on your algebra rearranging skills. You're actually you're being assessed on how you can read the question and use your skills, calculator or non, to solve it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions? Just be aware of so in trig, if you're finding the angle using sine, we used solve, but can you remember that little bit there? And there's actually a video and notes on the OneNote where we had to say if you're using sine to find an angle, so if you're using that area rule for sine, which will be in your exam, okay, so area and Heron's rule will be in your exam, you need to remember to set it up so that you've got given that C is between 0 and 180. So that was to try and make sure you get it, because otherwise you get lots and lots of different answers. So you need to actually remember how to do that. So I would put those things into your notes. So to get those buttons, just as a reminder, to get those buttons, you needed to click on Control and the equal sign. So Control equals, and it brings up those buttons. So Control equals brings up the given that sign, the greater than, the less than, and the not equal to sign we don't really use.
Do you have to put that in every time you're doing the...
Not when you're doing SOHCAHTOA or anything like that, only if you're trying to find an angle using the area rule. So pretty much only when you put all of this in. Only when you put that formula in. Okay, the half AB sine C. The area formula. That's the only time you use it at the moment. After your exam, we'll be doing one more thing where you'll need to put it in as well. Only when you're finding the area, only when you're using that rule to find an angle.
So the angle could be 66.
Yep, so the angle could either be 60, 67 or 113, but in the question for this, it said the acute angle, so therefore you knew it was the 67. Okay?
So if it didn't ask for the acute or whatever, would you just put both answers?
You could write both, but in these questions, we'll always ask you for one or the other if there's two answers. Okay? Any questions to there? All right, matrices is what we're going to do as well, but I just want to quickly remind you of how to use your calculator for them. A lot of people in their test didn't use their calculator and spent a lot of time in the calculator section doing like quite complex multiplication of matrices, which is really hard when they could have just used their calculator for it. So to be aware, in your calculator, there is a section which is for matrices. So again, in calculator, we go menu and we go matrix and vector. Anytime in a calculator section you get matrix questions, you want to go Menu, matrix, vector. Let's see what we can use. When I go there, I can then do lots of different things. We're going to create one, and you're always going to create one. So menu, 7, 1. Now, what you'll notice is there's actually a couple of things we could use here. We want to create a matrix. That's the first one. But you can also create a zero matrix. You can also create an identity matrix. And so you can use, that's a way easier than creating a matrix and putting in all the numbers, all the zeros and the ones. So if we wanted to do an identity matrix, I can click on identity, and then it puts in brackets because it's saying, I want to write an identity matrix, but how big of an identity matrix do you want? And so I might say I want to do like a 5 by 5 matrix. So I'm just going to click in 5 and press enter, and it's going to give me a 5 by 5 identity matrix there. Yes. All right, so a zero matrix, if I go menu, matrix, create, 0. Now this time a zero matrix doesn't have to be a square matrix. So therefore I need to put in 2 dimensions. So I might say I want a matrix which is 3 by 4. So I go, and so this is 0, 3, and then I write comma 4. Or comma 1, because that's just what I've accidentally written. Enter, it's going to give me a 3 by 1 0 matrix. Every number in a 0 matrix is 0. Okay? Now, I'm going to go through those things today and tomorrow. So that's my goal. But to be able to put, so in a calculator section, that's how you can put them in. Now, you also need to remember, so I'm just going to use an identity matrix to start with. So actually, I'll just copy this. So I had problems with this with the other class, but let's see how we go. All right. So I've got this matrix, and I just want to change a couple of numbers. This is what, oh, yeah, it does not let me change the numbers. Okay. I'm not going to change the numbers. All right, so I've got this identity matrix, which I want to do a whole heap of things too. So I might want to square it or do something or whatever, okay? It's in the test, it's labelled as A. How do I make it labelled as A in my calculator? How do I store it as A in my calculator? It's a little line. So to get the line, I need to go control there up the top, control there. It gives me the little arrow. And what this is saying is I'm going to store in my calculator this matrix as A. So I'm going to put in A and then press enter. So now, instead of having to actually write out that matrix every time I'm going to use it, if I then get asked to work out what 4A is, I can just write 4 times A and it gives me the answer. I can write A squared. Now, it'll end up being the same answer, but that's just because it's an identity matrix. A squared, and it'll give me the answer. So I can store things as A, B, C, D, whatever it is, and then all I have to do is use that to do my calculations, which I'll talk about how to do those things later.
Does that A then get like, if you want to do like,
so you need to restore it as A or just open a new page, like open a new thing, yeah. So it does last within that document thing. I would highly recommend that you use the store function, because in your test, you're going to a lot of the time be asked to find, like, to multiply A times B or B times A or something like that. If you actually save it as A, save it as B, and then if A times B doesn't work, you can try B times A and see if that works as well, because that's where a lot of the time people are making mistakes. Rob?
How do you copy it, like, to make it, like, so competitive?
So you can, do you mean like once you've got it over here?
Yeah, like when it's like, when it's entered, how do you copy the matrix? Copy and paste it.
Do you go with your pointer? Is that how you
Like
scroll? Yeah, does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I've written the notes in here which are in the OneNote. So menu 711. Also, just to know that to store a matrix, as I said, make sure that you click there and then allocate a letter and press enter. Okay, they are the main skills, calculator skills you need to know. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah? Any other calculator things people need me to go through? All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go through matrices. I might just stop this for a second.